My name is Ava. I'm 27, and I've always believed that family comes first. As an accountant, I built my life on hard work and responsibility values I thought my family shared. When my sister Jessica got engaged, I was thrilled to be her maid of honor. But that joy turned to horror when I discovered a $76,000 wedding contract with my forged signature. My refusal to pay sparked a family war I never saw coming, but what they didn't expect was how I would fight back. If you've ever had family take advantage of your kindness, drop a like and subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from as I share how I turned the tables on the ultimate betrayal. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in suburban Chicago with my parents and older sister Jessica. We weren't rich, but our parents made sure we never felt like we were missing out on anything. While Jessica was the outgoing, popular one who everyone adored, I was more reserved and focused on academics. Despite our differences, I looked up to my sister and we shared a special bond, or at least I thought we did. Our parents always had a soft spot for Jessica. When she wanted dance lessons, they found a way to pay for them. When she needed a car for college, they dipped into their savings. Meanwhile, I worked part-time jobs starting at 16 to save for my education. I didn't resent this dynamic at the time. Jessica had this magnetic personality that made everyone want to give her the world. Jessica just needs a little more support, my mom would say. You're so independent, Ava. You've always been able to take care of yourself. By 22, I had graduated with an accounting degree, the first college graduate in our family. I took out loans and worked multiple jobs to make it happen. Those years were tough. Balancing night shifts at a local diner with morning classes, falling asleep over textbooks, and eating ramen more often than I care to remember. But the hard work paid off when I landed a position at a respected accounting firm in Chicago. Over the next 5 years, I built a stable life for myself. I paid off my student loans, bought a small but comfortable condo, and started building my savings. My parents would often tell relatives how proud they were of my financial mind, though they never asked for my advice on their own struggles with credit card debt. Then came the news that changed everything. Jessica was engaged to Brian, her boyfriend of only 8 months. Brian came from money. His family owned a chain of successful car dealerships across Illinois. The first time I met him at their engagement dinner, he seemed nice enough, if a bit reserved around our family's more modest circumstances. "You're going to be my maid of honor, right?" Jessica asked, grabbing my hands across the dinner table. Her diamond engagement ring caught the light, almost blinding in its size. "Of course," I said, genuinely happy for her. I wouldn't miss it for the world. What I didn't realize was how quickly Jessica's wedding vision would spiral into something unprecedented for our family. Within weeks, she was talking about destination ceremonies, designer dresses, and guest lists approaching 300 people. "Brian's family expects a certain kind of wedding," she explained when I gently questioned the growing extravagance. "I can't embarrass them with something small." I started noticing uncomfortable moments when wedding costs came up. My parents would look at me expectantly, and Jessica would make comments about how lucky they were to have a successful daughter in the family. "With your great job, you could really help make this special for your sister," my mom said one night after dinner. "After all, you don't have any big expenses like we do." The implication was clear, but I tried to brush it off. I had already decided to give Jessica $2,000 as an engagement gift, which I thought was generous considering my modest salary. Little did I know that in their minds, my contribution had a few more zeros attached to it. As the wedding plans progressed, Jessica insisted I join her for the first meeting with her wedding planner, Samantha. We met at an upscale bakery in downtown Chicago, where Jessica ordered the most expensive pastries on the menu without even glancing at the prices. "We're thinking late June at the Grand Palmer Hotel," Jessica told Samantha, referencing one of Chicago's most exclusive venues. "With full floral arrangements, a 10-piece band, and custom everything." When Samantha brought up potential costs, Jessica waved her hand dismissively. "Let's not worry about that right now. We just want to secure all the best vendors before they're booked." Throughout the meeting, I noticed Jessica purposely steering away from budget discussions. Whenever Samantha tried to pin down numbers, Jessica would change the subject or say, "We can talk about that later." The following week, Jessica called asking for a small favor. "The venue needs a deposit of $5,000 to hold the date," she said casually. "Mom and Dad are a little short this month. Could you cover it? I'll pay you back, promise." "That's a lot, Jess," I replied, uncomfortable with the request. "I already gave you $2,000 as an engagement gift." "That was for us, not the wedding," she countered, her voice taking on a familiar whine. "Come on, Ava. You know I'd do the same for you." Against my better judgment, I transferred the money. I told myself it was just a loan, though. Deep down, I suspected I'd never see it again. That $5,000 was just the beginning. Soon Jessica was texting me almost daily with new emergencies. The photographer needed a retainer, the florist had a limited time offer, the dress shop wouldn't hold her gown without a down payment. "Why can't Brian help with some of these costs?" I finally asked after sending her another $1,000. "His parents are handling the rehearsal, dinner, and honeymoon," Jessica snapped. "It's tradition for the bride's family to pay for the wedding. Don't be so selfish, Ava." 3 months into the engagement, I visited our parents' house for Sunday dinner. I arrived early and overheard Jessica and my mother talking in the kitchen. "She can definitely afford it," my mother was saying. "She just needs to be convinced it's her responsibility." "I know," Jessica replied. "I've been working on her. Trust me, by the time the contracts need to be signed, she'll agree to cover everything." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. When I confronted them, Jessica burst into tears, claiming I'd misunderstood. She hugged me tight, promising that wasn't what she meant at all. "I would never take advantage of you," she sobbed. "You're my sister and my best friend." Mom backed her up, of course. "We're all just stressed about making this perfect for Jessica. You know how important this is." I wanted to believe them, so I accepted the apology. But after that, I started noticing how I was being excluded from certain wedding planning activities, despite being the maid of honor. Jessica would tell me they were just quick decisions that didn't need my input. When I did attend appointments, the vendors would give me strange looks as if they knew something I didn't. The distance between my family and me grew as the wedding date approached. Every family gathering became a wedding planning session with constant references to Ava's contribution that made me increasingly uncomfortable. I started making excuses to miss these gatherings, which only resulted in angry texts from both Jessica and my parents, accusing me of not supporting my sister during the most important time of her life. 6 weeks before the wedding date, I received a call that would change everything. I was at work when my phone rang with an unknown number. "Is this Ava Hamilton?" a man asked when I answered. "Yes, this is she." "This is Marcus from the Grand Palmer Hotel. I'm calling about the missed payment for the Hamilton-Sullivan wedding. It was due last week, and we haven't received the funds." I nearly dropped my phone. "What payment? I don't know anything about a payment." "The second installment of $25,000, Marcus explained, sounding confused. "According to our contract, you're the responsible party. The initial deposit of $20,000 was paid on time, but this payment is now overdue." "There must be some mistake," I said, my heart racing. "I never signed any contract." "I have it right in front of me with your signature, Ms. Hamilton. The total package is $76,000 to be paid in 4 installments. You signed as the financially responsible party back in January." The room started spinning. "I need to see this contract immediately." I left work early and drove straight to the Grand Palmer Hotel, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Marcus met me in the lobby and escorted me to his office, where he pulled out a thick contract. There it was, my signature on the bottom of every page. Except it wasn't my signature at all. Someone had forged it, copying from the birthday card I'd given Jessica months ago that had been displayed on her mantel. "I did not sign this," I said firmly, fighting back tears. "This is fraud." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Ms. Hamilton, we've been working with your sister and parents for months. They assured us you were handling the finances." "They lied to you," I said, the betrayal hitting me in waves. "And they forged my signature." Marcus called in Samantha, the wedding planner, who reluctantly admitted she'd had concerns. "Your sister and parents always handled everything, but they insisted you wanted it this way," Samantha explained. They said you were too busy with work to attend meetings, but had agreed to finance the wedding as your gift. With growing horror, I asked to see all contracts related to the wedding. One by one, Samantha pulled them out: catering, flowers, photography, entertainment, all with my forged signature totaling nearly $76,000. I sat in stunned silence as she explained how Jessica and my parents had planned everything repeatedly, assuring vendors that I was fully on board financially. They had even used my email address for some communications, creating a fake account that was one letter off from my real one. When I got home that night, I checked my credit report and discovered multiple loan inquiries I hadn't made. They had actually tried to take out loans in my name to pay for this wedding, but thankfully had been denied. I sat in my car in the parking garage of my building for almost an hour, sobbing uncontrollably. The people I trusted most in the world had conspired to defraud me of my life savings. They had planned this for months, meticulously forging documents and lying to everyone involved. The level of betrayal was beyond anything I could have imagined. The next day, I drove to my parents' house where Jessica had been staying during the final wedding preparations. When I arrived, they were in the middle of a planning session with Brian and his parents in the living room. Elaborate flower arrangements and sample place settings covered every surface. "Ava," my mother said with forced brightness when I walked in, "we didn't expect you today." I didn't bother with pleasantries. "I just came from the Grand Palmer Hotel," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "And before that, I spoke with the florist, the caterer, and the photographer. Funny thing, they all seem to think I'm paying for this wedding." The room went completely silent. Brian and his parents looked confused, while Jessica, Mom, and Dad exchanged panicked glances. "I saw the contracts," I continued, "all $76,000 worth, with my forged signature on every page." "Ava, we can explain." My father started standing up. "Explain what?" "How you committed fraud. How you forged my signature. How you tried to take out loans in my name." My voice rose with each question. Jessica burst into tears right on cue. "We were going to tell you, we just knew you wouldn't understand how important this is to me. Understand, you tried to steal $76,000 from me." "It's not stealing when it's family," my mother interjected, her voice cold. "You have the money and don't need it like we do. Jessica deserves her dream wedding." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. No one deserves to commit fraud. "After everything we've done for you," my father said, his face red with anger. "This is how you repay us, by embarrassing us in front of Brian's family, by ruining your sister's wedding." Jessica approached me, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Ava, I've dreamed of this wedding my whole life. If you love me, you'll do this for me." "If you loved me," I countered, "you wouldn't have tried to steal from me." Brian's parents were exchanging uncomfortable glances, clearly shocked by what they were witnessing. "We're your family," my mother said, her voice hardening. "And family makes sacrifices for each other. If you won't do this, then maybe you don't deserve to be part of this family anymore." The ultimatum hung in the air. Pay for the wedding or be disowned. I looked at each of their faces, people I had loved and trusted my entire life, and saw nothing but entitlement and manipulation. "Then I guess I don't have a family anymore," I whispered, turning to leave. As I walked out, tears blurring my vision, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Brian, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Ava, wait," he called. "I had no idea about any of this. I thought my parents and I were splitting costs with your parents. Jessica told me you had volunteered to help with a small portion. I never would have agreed to any of this." His shock seemed genuine, and I felt a pang of sympathy for him. He was marrying into a family of con artists and didn't even know it. "You might want to reconsider who you're marrying," I told him before getting in my car and driving away. The next morning, I called my friend Taylor, who happened to be a lawyer specializing in identity theft. When I explained what had happened, she was horrified. "This is serious, Ava," Taylor said. "We need to document everything immediately and file a police report." Over the next few days, Taylor helped me gather evidence. We took screenshots of the forged documents, recorded conversations with vendors confirming my family's deception, and documented the unauthorized credit inquiries. Filing the police report was one of the hardest things I've ever done. The officer taking my statement looked at me sympathetically when I broke down, explaining that it was my own family who had committed the fraud. "Unfortunately, we see this more often than you'd think," she told me. "Family members are responsible for a significant percentage of identity theft cases." After filing the report, I sent certified letters to all vendors explaining the situation and including copies of the police report. Taylor helped me draft the letters, which firmly stated that I would not be responsible for any charges, as the contracts had been fraudulently signed. I also met with my bank to lock down my accounts and credit placing fraud alerts and credit freezes to prevent any future attempts to use my information. Throughout this process, my phone exploded with texts and calls from my family. My father threatened to destroy my reputation if I didn't drop the police report. My mother sent long, guilt-inducing messages about how I was tearing the family apart over money. Jessica alternated between rage and pleading, saying one minute that I was dead to her and the next that she would forgive me if I changed my mind. I blocked their numbers, but Jessica showed up at my apartment one evening, causing a scene in the lobby. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed, as security tried to escort her out. "It's my wedding. You're supposed to love me." My neighbors watched, wide-eyed, as she was finally removed from the building. I spent that night at Taylor's apartment, afraid to go home. The final communication came from my parents in the form of a voicemail. "If you don't fix this immediately, we'll make sure everyone knows what a selfish, ungrateful daughter you are. We've already told the entire family how you promised to help, then backed out at the last minute. No one will ever look at you the same way again." Their threats only strengthened my resolve. With Taylor's help, I stayed firm in my refusal to pay for anything, and gradually the vendors began dealing with my parents and Jessica directly for the outstanding balances. A week before the originally scheduled wedding date, I received a text from Jessica. "We've moved the wedding to a smaller venue. It would mean a lot if you came. Saturday at 3 p.m. at Mom and Dad's." I debated for days about whether to attend. Part of me wanted to see this through to the end, while another part just wanted to move on with my life. Ultimately, I decided to go, bringing Taylor as moral support. When we arrived at my parents' backyard, I was surprised by how nice everything looked despite the scaled-down arrangements. About 50 guests milled around instead of the planned 300. Jessica had managed to pull together a respectable ceremony on what I assumed was a much smaller budget. The reception from my family was icy. My parents barely acknowledged my presence, and Jessica gave me a stiff hug before turning away. Extended family members I hadn't seen in years greeted me with cool politeness, and I overheard snippets of conversations about how I had ruined Jessica's special day with my selfishness. "They really did a number on your reputation," Taylor whispered as we found seats for the ceremony. I nodded, trying to ignore the stares and whispers. I expected that. The ceremony went smoothly, with Jessica and Brian exchanging vows under a floral arch in the backyard. Despite everything, I felt a pang watching my sister get married, remembering how close we once were. At the reception, after everyone had eaten and the small band started playing, Jessica clinked her glass for attention. The music stopped, and all eyes turned to her. "I want to thank everyone for coming to our intimate celebration," she said, smiling brightly. "While this isn't the wedding we originally planned, Brian and I are just happy to be surrounded by those we love most." She paused, her eyes finding me in the crowd. "And I have wonderful news to share. My sister Ava has had a change of heart and will be funding the reception of our dreams, after all. We've rescheduled our grand celebration at the Grand Palmer for next month, and you're all invited." The crowd broke into applause while I sat frozen in shock. Taylor grabbed my arm as guests turned to smile at me appreciatively. Jessica was beaming in my direction, as if daring me to contradict her in front of everyone. I stood slowly, my heart pounding. The room quieted as I made my way to the center of the gathering. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," I said calmly. "I haven't agreed to fund any additional celebration." Jessica's smile faltered. "Don't be modest, Ava. We talked about this." No, we didn't, I replied, my voice steady. In fact, what no one here knows is that my sister and parents forged my signature on contracts totaling $76,000 without my knowledge or consent. A murmur ran through the crowd. I saw my mother start to move toward me, but my father held her back. They committed fraud in my name, I continued, and when I refused to pay, they threatened to disown me. I filed a police report and have documentation of everything. I turned to address the wider family. They've been telling you I backed out of promises I never made. The truth is, I was never consulted about any of this. I pulled out my phone and displayed the forged contract, passing it around. This is not my signature. They copied it from a birthday card. Brian's parents stood up, their faces stony with anger as they examined the evidence. Brian himself looked devastated as he stared at Jessica, who had gone pale. "We had no idea," Brian's father said loudly. "We were told Ava had generously offered to help with costs. This is criminal." The reception dissolved into chaos. Jessica ran crying into the house, followed by my mother. My father attempted to salvage the situation, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but the damage was done. Guests began leaving, and Brian's parents pulled him aside for what appeared to be a very serious conversation. I hadn't planned to expose everything so publicly, but Jessica's lie had forced my hand. As Taylor and I left, several relatives approached to apologize for believing the stories they'd been told about me. My Aunt Linda hugged me tight and whispered, "I always knew something wasn't right about their version." The aftermath of the wedding day confrontation was both painful and liberating. Brian's family called off the wedding entirely once they learned the full truth. Jessica's dream wedding never happened, and she blamed me entirely for the collapse of her relationship when Brian broke off their engagement a week later. For months, I didn't hear from my parents or Jessica. The silence was both a relief and a wound that wouldn't heal. I had lost my family, but I had stood up for myself in a way I never had before. The police agreed not to pursue charges against my family on the condition that they attend financial counseling and acknowledge their wrongdoing. I was told they completed the program, though they never reached out to apologize. During those months of estrangement, I discovered strengths I didn't know I had. I sought therapy to process the betrayal and learned to set boundaries I should have established years ago. My circle of friends became my chosen family, supporting me through the darkest moments when I questioned whether I had done the right thing. Unexpectedly, extended family members began reaching out. My Aunt Linda invited me for dinner, confessing that my parents had a history of financial manipulation that the family had overlooked for too long. My cousin Sam shared similar stories of being pressured to loan money that was never repaid. "You're the first one who ever stood up to them," Sam told me. "It's made a lot of us rethink our own boundaries." 6 months after the wedding debacle, my parents reached out asking to meet. At a neutral coffee shop, they seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating than I remembered. "We've been doing a lot of thinking," my father said stiffly. "The counselor helped us see some patterns in our behavior." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was a start. I made it clear that any relationship moving forward would have different rules: no financial entanglement, respect for boundaries, and honest communication. "I love you both," I told them, "but I will never allow myself to be manipulated or taken advantage of again." They agreed, though I could tell it was difficult for them to accept this new power dynamic. Our relationship slowly began to rebuild on these new terms, with occasional setbacks when old patterns emerged, but genuine progress over time. Jessica took longer to come around. Almost a year after the wedding that never happened, she asked to meet. She had been in therapy herself, prompted by Brian's parting words about getting help for her issues with honesty and entitlement. "I didn't see it then," she admitted over coffee. "I thought I deserved everything I wanted, regardless of who had to pay for it. I'm so sorry, Ava." Her apology seemed sincere, though I knew rebuilding trust would take time. We started small, occasional text messages, brief coffee meetings, and gradually found a new way to be sisters. Not the blind trust of before, but something more mature and balanced. 2 years after the incident, our family dynamic has fundamentally changed. My parents still occasionally slip into old habits of expectation, but now I have the strength to gently but firmly maintain my boundaries. Jessica and I have a relationship based on mutual respect rather than her taking and me giving. The experience taught me that real love doesn't exploit or manipulate. It doesn't forge signatures or steal identities. Real love respects boundaries and treats others with honesty and consideration. Standing up for myself cost me the family I thought I had, but it gave me the family I deserved, one built on authentic connection rather than obligation and guilt. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say no to those you love when saying yes would harm your well-being. I hope my story helps someone else find that courage. Where do you draw the line between family loyalty and self-respect? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more stories of healing and setting boundaries. Thank you for listening, and remember, loving yourself isn't selfish. It's the foundation for all healthy relationships in your life.